We begin, though, in Saudi Arabia, where the first high-level meeting between the United States and Russia since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine 3 years ago has ended in Riyadh. The talks lasted more than 4 hours. The State Department said they'd agreed to name separate teams to negotiate an end to the conflict in Ukraine. A Russian delegate described the talks as positive and constructive. It marks the most significant shift in the diplomatic relationship between the two countries since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. U.S. officials described the talks as a first step to see if Russia was serious, but not the start of negotiations to end the war. But the Russians, Sergei Lavrov and his team, see it very differently, saying the meeting is about the normalization of Russia's relations with the U.S. It follows the U.S. call in Munich for concessions by Ukraine, developments that have stunned Europe, unleashing apprehension across Ukraine and leaving the rest of the continent scrambling to shore up its collective security.
Been consistently saying that good US-Russia relations are very important for the whole world. Only jointly can Russia and US address lots of world problems, resolve global conflicts, and offer solutions. And on our team, on our delegation, I'll be responsible mostly for economic area. And we can do a lot in economic area. It's very important to understand that US businesses lost around $300 billion from leaving Russia. So there is huge economic toll on many countries from what's happening right now. And we believe the way forward is through solutions, through problem solving. And we really see that President Trump and his team is a team of problem solvers. People who have already addressed a number of big challenges very swiftly, very efficiently and very successfully. And we believe that this problem-solving approach is very important to address issues that the world is facing now.
And the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has also been speaking. Unfortunately, we didn't quite get to that clip, but he was essentially saying that from here on, other participants or other active players in that war in Ukraine will be taking part in peace talks. So we'll see how that evolves. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from London by the international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Good to see you, Dr. Laskiewicz. So an unprecedented meeting between the US and Russia to talk about a possible peace between Moscow and Kyiv, a meeting, as we mentioned previously, to which Ukraine and European allies have not been invited. What's your assessment of the outcome of that meeting?
Well, the outcome is obviously to Russia's intense satisfaction. When they were speaking there, the Russians said it was a joint meeting to jointly solve world problems, as if Russia and America are the only two countries which can, in fact, decide anything about the world. And this is, of course, a throwback to the previous Cold War era, when, in fact, such summits did decide a great deal about the world. But that is, in principle, no longer the case. But, of course, now we're back to where we were in that sense, that Russia so believes, and America is, of course, going along with this. In fact, America initiated this. That's number one. Number two, it's clear that the talks are going to go ahead to further talks. So from that point of view, they were very successful for both America and Russia, because America wants to solve the war, so does Russia on its terms. And it would appear that both sides, from this point of view, had a very successful meeting. The third point to remember about such meetings, it is what is not announced can be as important as what is announced. There will be more meetings, of course, and already we had a telephone call for 90 minutes from President Trump and President Putin together. And here, what is missing is what else did they cover? You must remember that if the Munich conference just held recently recalled echoes of 1938, when, of course, Chamberlain lost Czechoslovakia to Germany, this recalls more Yalta, where the fate of Poland, for example, was decided. Poland was not present. It was decided by Russia and America, and then it was then Great Britain. And what else, the point about it is that it was secret what was decided. And here we have the possibility that there are actually secret aspects to this meeting, for example, about economics, Greenland, joint working together, that have not been fully brought out yet.
Nevertheless, the intention appears to be to end the war in Ukraine. President Biden has said that quite emphatically, and subsequently his Secretary of State Marco Rubio also saying that at the end of that meeting in Riyadh. So, I mean, at least on the face of it, even though such crucial talks had a very small guest list, they seem to be on the right trajectory.
They're certainly on a trajectory to trying to finish the war, of that there is no doubt. In this sense, the talks were successful. The question is on what terms? Here comes the problem. Secondly, please note, no one else was there, neither Ukraine nor Europe. It's now, in that sense, very much a bilateral discussion. And here comes the problem. Can such a bilateral discussion lead to a settlement which everyone will accept? It would appear, judging by the pleasantness of the meeting, that Russia and America can find a settlement. But what Ukraine will make of it in Europe are another matter altogether.
It's very interesting, the line that you're going along there. And that sort of makes me ask you the question whether you think that there is concern in Europe that perhaps Donald Trump is so keen to get to the end point that he might give away anything to achieve it.
It would appear that he is quite prepared to give away something. Of that, there is no doubt. The question is how much, that we don't know. But it would appear that certainly Donald Trump is quite prepared to go along with Ukraine not being part of NATO, quite possibly not having any peacekeeping troops from abroad, and ceding some territory. That would appear to be certainly possible. On the other hand, what is quite clear also is that Europe can do nothing about any of this. And their recent conference held in Paris yesterday was proof of just how far Europe is from achieving anything at all in the sense of being able to take over from America should America strike a deal with Russia.
Absolutely. And again, a very interesting line of thinking there, because, I mean, if this is any step towards normalizing relations between the US and Russia, which certainly Moscow seems to think that it is, I mean, it's going to have huge consequences, is it not, for Ukraine and indeed other world issues? For instance, under the Biden administration, the US supplied billions of dollars worth of defense materials to Kyiv. And I'm wondering how important this political turnaround in US thinking, what it might mean for the US's partners in Europe.
What it quite clearly means is Europe is no longer of number one in USA's list of priorities. China is equally as important, Russia is equally as important, and therefore Europe is simply just one area amongst others. Historically very important, of course, but quite clearly Trump's made up his mind that it's not going to dominate his thinking. As for supplying aid, Trump is quite clear on this point. He has no desire to supply aid. Ukraine might be able to buy weapons by handing over its mineral wealth, and Ukraine is quite rich in this respect. But there is no question, as far as I can see, of Donald Trump providing aid, assuming he can make an agreement with Russia. This is the key point. Donald Trump has stated if he can find no agreement with Russia, then in that case, he probably would be prepared to supply aid to Ukraine. But as things stand, there will be no more, and they're going for a peace treaty. And if they get it, Donald Trump from his side will do his best to see Ukraine toes the line.
And in terms of who goes on, assuming there is some kind of agreement and there needs to be some sort of peacekeeping at the sort of the borders between the two countries, in terms of who goes on to enforce security around Ukraine and European NATO countries more broadly, President Trump has moved that conversation significantly on in the short time he's been in office, hasn't he? Because now everyone's saying that this is Europe's job and it has to make decisions about the money and the troops.
Precisely. But here we come to a very now ever stronger Russia diplomatically, who is saying they don't want any European troops anywhere near their borders. So therefore, it is most unlikely that Europe will be able to police anything. America's made it quite clear it won't police anything. And so therefore, the security guarantees that President Zelensky seeks for Ukraine would appear to be already non-existent. After all, President Trump, by saying this, and Europe by showing that it's not capable last night of organizing itself quickly, would vitiate any attempt for there to be strong guarantees for Ukraine. The other point to mention here is, of course, that if Europe is to take over, it doesn't have the money, it doesn't have the quality of the military hardware. It simply is not in America's league. Should America pull out, Ukraine would find it very difficult to carry on fighting simply with European help.
And just in terms of the mood music, broadly speaking, that you're hearing from those talks that ended in Riyadh, does it seem that there is much hope going forward?
Well, it depends. Hope for what? In terms of there being a peace treaty signed by America and Russia deciding the fate of Ukraine, I think that is a very strong possibility. In the sense of a peace treaty which Ukraine wants to sign and looking forward to, and Europe likewise, I think there is very little hope at present. Far from it. It would appear that there may well seek to be an end of the war, but it will only be, in any case, temporary, because it's not clear without any guarantees that Russia won't strike again. According to my books, of course, which I wrote, I imagined that Russia would, in fact, strike again, and that this was no more than simply one step forward for Putin, and a very successful one if he doesn't get this treaty with America.
And I mean, just pulling back from the specifics of what's being talked about or what was talked about in Riyadh, this is quite a moment, isn't it? I mean, this is the US saying we've guaranteed security in Europe for many decades, but don't rely on us carrying on doing that. So a defining moment.
Yes, as things stand, for at least the next 4 years, Europe is very much simply one of the pack of nations or areas that America is interested in. It is no longer a priority. America will not come automatically to Europe's aid. It certainly won't do it for free. And therefore, from this point, it is very, very different. Literally, since President Biden left, the world has turned upside down in this respect. And the other aspect of it is that NATO has virtually ceased to exist. Please note that in yesterday's conference by the Europeans, or today's, NATO is not even mentioned as should be the leader of that matter today, even in taking part in anything.
Well, as always, we appreciate your assessment. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the International Affairs Analyst. He was talking to me on the line there from London.